The New Orleans Pelicans, currently 11-9 on the season, 12th in offensive rating, 16th in defensive rating, not really striving in any one area. I think there's opportunity for this team to improve. I think there's opportunity for this team to never really take a jump, part of that being because their head coach, Alvin Gentry, as well as their personnel outside of DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis. But if we can dive into what they're doing, what they're not doing, what would be a realistic expectation for these guys for the rest of the season? Well, they're currently 7th in the Western Conference, and if they finished with 44, 45 wins, got in there at the 7th seed, the 8th seed, or maybe even the 6th seed, I wouldn't be too shocked. But I also wouldn't be too shocked if they finished around 40 wins and they missed it out just barely. I did pick these guys to make the playoffs, if I remember correctly. And if we just talk about when DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis are in the game together, the Pelicans are plus 4.1 in the 440 minutes those two have played together. And their starting lineup is actually plus 5.5, the lineup being those two with Cunningham, Jrue Holiday, and E'Twaun Moore. And I guess that lineup works because Holiday can facilitate, Cunningham can help out defensively, E'Twaun Moore is just kind of okay on both sides of the floor. He's a good shooter, I'll give him that. I guess that lineup just doesn't have any glaring weaknesses, and I guess it makes sense why that one would work. But interestingly, they have two other lineups that are pretty negative with Cousins and AD on the floor together. They both involve Jrue Holiday and E'Twaun Moore, but instead of Dante Cunningham, it's either Jameer Nelson or it's Rajon Rondo. As far as Jameer Nelson, Nelson has a tough time on defense at this point, and maybe the combination of him as well as E'Twaun Moore is just too much of a drop-off defensively to where it just doesn't really work. Rondo's defense is not very good either anymore. So maybe those could be the reasons. The drop-off from Cunningham's defense to those two just might not work out. So maybe having the two point guard lineups just is not the best idea for Alvin Gentry moving forward. I think this is where they're really missing Solomon Hill, because even if he's not much offensively, he could at least be another decent defensive wing that you could put in there when Cunningham is out. Whereas now, there just really isn't another guy who can do it like that. Unfortunately, they're just going to have to kind of deal with it. So whether those two point guard lineups can be better defensively, and actually, they seem to just be worse across the board. Less assists, the rebounding percentage is worse, so just overall, just worse lineups. You're just going to have to find a way to manage those, whether that's replacing the second point guard with like Jordan Crawford. Maybe that could be an idea. Actually, it's not an idea because they already released Jordan Crawford. So never mind on that one. Maybe Ian Clark, just to get a spot shooter. His threes are not really going in right now. He's only shooting 31%. Whatever. I'm just spitballing some ideas. Maybe they have to go in free agency and find another decent defensive wing, because they just seem to be a better team when Cunningham is in the game, even if Cunningham is potentially the most boring player in the NBA. So, if we just talk about, I guess, the team on the floor now and move away from just the numbers a little bit, based on the things that I've seen, their offense is sometimes a little too basic. I understand that you're going to have moments where you just dump it off to Anthony Davis or DeMarcus Cousins in the low post, or you run a pick and roll with those two, or you run a pick and pop with either one of them. Yeah, I understand that should be a part of your offense, but it's all the other stuff where a lot of the time it just seems really basic. I wish there was more off-ball movement. I wish there was more cutting to the rim. While this team is not littered with three-point shooters, I think there's enough guys. Like, you could have little screens for E'Twaun Moore, little screens for Ian Clark to get them open. You could do stuff with Jrue Holiday off the ball. Although then, I guess the question comes into play, who can dribble, because the two point guard lineups are not working. But E'Twaun Moore can handle the ball a little bit, I just wish there was more stuff with their perimeter guys. And actually, earlier in the season, I went to a game of theirs in LA against the Lakers, and their perimeter guys actually did a pretty decent job of getting open. E'Twaun Moore, Ian Clark, these guys were getting open shots all over from a lot of off-ball movement, and I think it's because the players themselves are actually pretty decent at playing off of Anthony Davis and Cousins to where they can recognize like where the help's going to come and then where they should slide over to get easy passes. but I don't think Alvin Gentry's actual sets are getting them open. So, it's smart to use your star players, of course, and you're always going to get some easy buckets just because you have two great players who draw a lot of attention. But having those, 5 or 6 possessions a game where each one more can just get an open three because you just ran something with him, I think that could be the difference between them currently being the 12th best offense and maybe they jump up to like the 7th best offense, Now, to Alvin Gentry's credit, Jrue Holiday is not making his three-pointers at all right now, so we can't put all the blame on the head coach. Holiday is taking the same amount of threes that he's taken for almost his whole career, and they're just simply not going in. He's shooting 25% from outside right now. He's just going to have to start making them in. Simple as that. We should talk about Darius Miller, who has kind of come out of nowhere because, he wasn't really a knockdown shooter before this season. His rookie year, he shot well from three in like 1 3 a game. He's at 48% from three right now on 4 attempts a game. Definitely have him out there playing a decent amount of minutes. He's 6'8", 235 pounds. Maybe he could be your replacement for Dante Cunningham, playing small forward with Boogie as well as AD, and then moving to the small ball 4 when Cunningham comes out. That's an idea that I would experiment with if I was Alvin Gentry, because like I mentioned before, just having that other wing who's got some decent size, who's not going to get killed defensively in Cunningham, who can play the 3 with the 2 bigs, but then also play the 4 when one of the bigs is out there, it's working well for them, so maybe Darius Miller can facilitate that same sort of thing, while also being a better shooter than Dante Cunningham. And actually, let me correct myself a little bit here. There are a couple of lineups with Jrue and Jameer that are actually working well. One of them being with Tony Allen, Anthony Davis, and Darius Miller. So if Miller's not going to be a disaster on defense, Tony Allen's still going to be a damn good defender, then you have AD at center. I think that makes up for the fact that Jameer is not a very good defender. There's a similar lineup with Jameer out there without Jrue Holiday, where you have Tony Allen, Dante Cunningham, and Anthony Davis. So, if they're going to play Jameer Nelson out there, they're going to need a lot of defenders around him. So there does seem to be an avenue for the Pelicans being able to mix and match some of their guys. The problem is they have specialists. They have Ian Clark, who's 3-point shooting, Tony Allen's defense, Dante Cunningham's defense. Jameer Nelson is a ball handler who can still kind of shoot. But there's not a lot of two-way guys, so as a result, you got to mix and match, and you have to realize that some lineups are going to work and some lineups are not going to work. You can't really favor too much offense or too much defense, and we're just going to have to see if Alvin Gentry can balance that throughout the year. Between Dante Cunningham, Tony Allen, Anthony Davis, Darius Miller, if that's just enough size and enough guys who can play some defense, then that might be enough to where you can play Jameer and you can play Etuan Moore and these guys who are more offensive. And of course, you have Anthony Davis and you have DeMarcus Cousins. So as a result, you are going to have some nights where those two just dominate the other team on the offensive boards, or they just dominate them scoring inside, or there's just too much length towards the basket, and as a result, the other team's not going to be able to score inside enough. Sure, you're going to get some times when Boogie just doesn't play the best defense, but, if you just have 2 big bodies around the paint, then sometimes it doesn't matter as much. And as a result of those things, yeah, I think you can pencil in an extra 3 or 4 wins for them this season just off the strength of, even if the team as a whole doesn't play well, Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins just ball the hell out. So ultimately, do I feel good about the Pelicans moving forward? There's some concern because it can be hard to sustain success over an entire season when you don't have a lot of two-way players. But at the same time, Utah just lost Rudy Gobert. I have to expect the Lakers to drop off because they're young as hell. The Thunder, as of right now, have not figured out their offense. The Grizzlies just lost Mike Conley. The Clippers seem to be in a downward spiral. The Pelicans might get in there just on default because teams have injuries or whatever. But I think 45, 46 wins is a realistic expectation for these Pelicans. I think if Jrue Holiday's threes start dropping, they'll be pretty good offensively. So I look for them to get better offensively, creep into the top 10, and if they can just remain mid-tier on defense, then that's about all you can ask for.